I'm Shelby Oldham, and I'm here with John Quinn, longtime volunteer at Corona Heritage Park and Museum. John, you don't sound like you're from Corona. Where are you from and how did you end up here?
Originally, I was from New York. I grew up in 3 of the boroughs, but mainly in Brooklyn. And my dad was a superintendent of buildings, so we moved a lot. And I moved to California in 1975. I had an opportunity for a company. And we lived in Northridge for 25 years, and then decided to move closer to one of our daughters, who's a Corona resident. She had 5 children, and we wanted to be with them, and it was the best move we made because we've seen them grow up and get married. And that was in July of 2001.
You've been involved here with quite a few different things for a long time. How long has it been and what have you been up to?
My daughter mentioned that there was a museum that had opened up here in town. She didn't know anything about it, and I came up and I went into the museum and I was kind of fascinated, but found myself getting confused when I was looking at the start of Corona. It was called South Riverside, and in San Bernardino County, I believe at that time. There was no Riverside County. And Marla Benson happened to walk by. And I asked her if she could explain. She did. She told me that it was about 10 years later when it became Corona and there was now a Riverside County. And she casually asked me what my interests were. And I said, well, I like sailing and model railroads. And she said, oh my goodness, we're planning on having a model railroad exhibit here in the park. And so I signed up to be a worker. But that was the beginning of my involvement, because I showed up in October of 2001 for the first meeting that was organized by Ted and Marla. And at that meeting we drew up a paper, I don't remember what was it called, indicating that we were going to start a model railroad club.
What do you think it is about model trains that people like so much?
Well, a lot more in my years were interested in the model trains, more so than now, I think, with the young kids. Computers have replaced so much. There are games that the kids can play. So when you go to a model club, you usually see a lot of gray heads like me.
I understand during your career in the 1960s, you became one of the first computer programs and actually wrote in binary code. What was that like?
Oh, that's correct. I was working for a trucking company, and they wanted to get into data processing to do the billing for the company. And at the time, I was used by the company to be interviewed by IBM, National Cash Registers, and a couple of others to see which computer would fit our needs. And it was new for us, and it was new to business. In the meantime, I went to programming school and learned the basics of the programming. And I did write in binary at that time. I did it on a Manning machine because it was in 1s and 0s, and I believe it was either 7 or 8 characters. And I remember when I turned it into my instructor, he wanted to know what this was, and I told him. He made me sit down and key punch it into cards, which were the method of entry into the computer. But it gave me a really good, in-depth understanding of how the computer worked.
Was it always interesting to you? Did you feel yourself being drawn to it, or was it just like, oh, this is my job?
I was concerned that I wouldn't have a job, and that's what got me in. But after I got in, it was a mind game. I mean, it was just absolutely thrilling because you would walk around with hundreds of instructions in your head, resolving any problems you had. But it was also a way of organizing your thoughts.
The times and technologies are very different from when and where you grew up. What are some of the ways you've had to adapt over the years?
Well, you have to remember, let's see, I was born in 1928, and my early childhood was in the 1930s when they were still delivering in horse-drawn wagons. My mother would say, go for milk, and I'd go down and get a bottle of milk, and she didn't have to say what kind of milk because there was only one kind of milk. Iceman came. We didn't have a refrigerator until years later. We had a coal-burning stove for cooking. So a lot of things, but the technology kept advancing through the years, and I think I adopted to it, especially when I got into business.
Do you think like the turnaround rate for technology has increased lately?
Oh, tremendously. Just in the years that I've been in, had been involved, I guess it doubled every 18 months. Now it's probably even closer. We had 4K of memory in the computer that we were running a trucking company. 4K. Now you talk terabytes. I just can't. It's just totally amazing. And our sorting time, because we were a tape system, took 20 hours. Now, if I'm sitting in front of a computer screen and it doesn't refresh in the first 5 or 6 seconds, I'm upset.
How has being a volunteer in something like this affected your life?
Oh, tremendously. I volunteered as a docent one weekend a month, and because I'm retired, I also would come down during the week. Ted or Marla called me if somebody came, and I'd open up because I enjoyed showing them what was going on. And it gave me an opportunity to learn a lot about the local history in Corona. I became so interested here, I started noticing the trees. I used to be a birder. I started realizing that there were some beautiful birds that were either visiting or residing here throughout the years. I got interested in the history of the groves, or the ranches. I still call them groves. They seem to call them ranches here. And through the research, started meeting people, members of families who had been and still are important to Corona. They were here, their families were here in the early days, and they were either involved with the railroads, supplying the railroads, or in the groves. The ranch house that you pass by when you come in was built in 1911, I believe, by Mr. and Mrs. Hampton. That was the start of their grove, their ranch. I think it was about 900 acres at that time, with about 600 dedicated to lemons and 100 to oranges. And it grew from that, where it ultimately became greater than, the last figure I had seen was 2,300 acres, which made it the largest in California. I'm a city-bred kid, and I've fallen in love with Corona. I feel like I'm in a little town. I mean, they have a parade on Main Street. I've never seen that. You know, I go to the St. Patrick's Parade back east, but that was tremendously big. Here, children are walking their dogs or pushing little carts, and the fire department is in it, just like a little town.
Thank you, John. I'm glad we got to meet and talk today. I'm Shelby Oldham, and I'll see you next time on I Love Corona. This programming has been made possible by the Corona Heritage Foundation for the history, art, and culture of Corona, California. Be sure to subscribe to I Love Corona on YouTube and watch out for our next segment. I'm Shelby Oldham, and I love Corona.